Most organizations have a planning process. Most also have a sourcing strategy. And still, most are silently, invisibly losing money every single month. You know why? Because the two have never been designed to work together. So today we go inside both pillars. Okay, we will cover the layer 2 of plan and source. Layer 3 is going to be in more depth. So when I talk about plan, it is the anatomy of a world class planning cycle and the one metric that tells you immediately if yours is working or broken. Source, the procurement framework published in 1983 that is still ignored by most organizations today. We are going to discuss it. Okay, so in episode 1 we built the map. Today we go inside the territory. So this is the anatomy of a world class plan. There are 6 stages to it. Most organizations execute 2 or 3 stages only, and that is why they always keep on firefighting. Stage 1 is demand signal. Every available signal about what your customers will need has to be in this. Okay, it doesn't only comprise of the past year's data, it has to be more than that. Stage 2, supply review. What you can actually fulfill. The capacity comes into consideration over here. The lead times are taken into consideration. Supplier availability, all on one table. Gap analysis, where demand exceeds supply or supply exceeds demand. Real decisions get made here. Stage 4 is S&OP. Sales, operations, and finance are put in a room. The word is commit. Most organizations do this badly. Stage 5 is execution plan. Specific, assigned, time bound. Okay, it has to be specifically assigned to people in a time bound manner. If it is not assigned to a name or a proper function, it will not happen. Stage 6 is performance. This is the most underestimated stage. So this is basically, did what we planned actually happen? Because this loop is what separates organizations that improve from ones that repeat the same mistakes again and again. So please understand that this is a cycle. This is not a line. See, the performance will then feed your demand signal. The plan will then learn from it, and the organization will perform better. Now, when I talk about demand sensing, most organizations, like I said, use historical data. They look backward to plan forward. The best planning functions add real time signals to it. Okay, you have to add point of sales data, IoT signals, market events, what's the weather saying, what are the festivals which are coming, and many factors have to be added to it. That's called a smart plan. And this kind of a plan adjusts on daily, weekly, or monthly basis. It totally depends upon the product which you are, planning for as well. We'll go inside that in layer 3. So that gap between looking backward and reading the present is one of the most sustainable competitive advantages in modern operations. So while we go further on it, we will decode more. Now, why SNOP fails? You know, you have to understand that, I have seen many organizations where the SNOP process was genuinely excellent on paper. 3 weeks of rigorous work was done to start the SNOP. Okay, which was then ignored in 3 days. Why? I'll take this forward and let you know. So, week one was reconciling the spreadsheets, zero planning, because finance had one number, the ERP had one number, and sales was giving some another number. So, there was a data glitch. Okay, so reconciliation of data took a week. Week 2 was to manage politics because sales had inflated the data, operations had deflated the data, warehousing had deflated the data, or the information from the warehousing was incomplete. Nobody was reviewing the data. Week 3, everything was taken into consideration and SNOP was started. So the real decisions happen in this corridor. Okay, and then they are taken into ground and taken into action. But what happened was nobody, documented it, or nobody took the ownership of the execution of the SNOP. So that is how it was, abandoned in the plan was abandoned in 3 days of the first month. Not because the plan was wrong, because the organization had no execution culture to follow it. SCOR defines a metric called schedule achievement, which fixes this. Okay, because this is kind of a matrix where you measure the percentage of the agreed plan actually executed. And please make a note that world class organizations have 90% of achievement rate, and most of the organizations do not track it at all. So you cannot improve what you cannot measure. Start tracking your SNOP performance from this month. It will have a lot of impact on the results. So now we went through this matrix in our episode 1. That was a simple go through, and in detail go through will be further in future seasons, future sessions. Let's take a little bit more in depth kind of a look at it. So when I ask procurement managers with 15 to 20 years of experience, how do you decide which suppliers get your most attention? Most of them answered, whoever is giving us the most trouble right now. That is not a procurement strategy, that is a firefighting with a purchase order. So a framework published in 1983 solved this permanently. There are two dimensions, basically our supply risk, how much risk is your supply in, and the value impact it will have in your organization. Okay, there are four quadrants, four completely different strategies. When you talk about strategic quadrant, it is high value and high risk product. We need to build long term partnerships over here with our suppliers and never single source without a proper plan. Second is bottleneck, it's low value and high risk. These will not break your cost structure, but if they disappear, your operations will completely halt. Secure them first. Leverage, high value, low risk. You have to negotiate. The team has to negotiate hard over here. Switch when economies justify it. Non-critical, low value, low risk, automate this. Okay, you have to put it on automatic mode and do not put your best people on this. So most organizations negotiate their most critical supply relationships the same way they buy office supplies. That has to stop. So I will give you a real world analogy over here. It is kind of, a fast growing D2C consumer brand growing kind of 40% year on year had put 80% of their packaging to a single supplier. That supplier had a fire in the factory. So I did take you through this example in the first episode as well, but I want to repeat it because it has a lot of importance. Because this then turned into zero packaging, and since they had no other qualified supplier, no other alternative for emergency sourcing, the production had to stop with 6 weeks of no revenue. And when they came back, they had they had to pay a significantly higher cost, like loss of revenue was one thing, loss of customer was another thing, the rhythm of the business broke. So a lot of things they had to pay for. What the matrix would have told them over here, SCOR, is packaging was a bottleneck item, high supply risk. Strategy, secure supply, carry safety stock, qualify backups before you need them. But they were treating it as a non-critical, and this misclassification caused them 6 weeks of no revenue. So single source dependency is not a sourcing strategy, it is a countdown. The question is not if it will fail, it is when it will fail. So now we understand that plan and source go hand in hand. They don't work alone. Though they are two different pillars, but they cannot be designed in isolation. I put it in kind of two failure parts. Failure one is when plan overcommits to demand and doesn't, the procurement when building the plan is not consulted at all. The plan is overcommitting to demand levels that the supply cannot deliver. So that is very important to taken into consideration. The capacity has to be taken into consideration. Failure two is source locks into a single supplier without plans risk assessment. When that supplier fails, the entire plan collapses. So if plan and source are not designed together, one of them is lying. Now we talk about make in episode 3. We will be covering CODP, customer order decoupling point, layer 2. That is the most strategic manufacturing decision. Okay, get it wrong, you are either sitting on inventory mountains or losing sales. That decision has a name. Next week we are going to cover that. Now before you go from here, I want you to do something. Take your top 10 suppliers by spend, plot them on two axes, supply risk and value impact. Don't overthink on it, okay, just go with it. I know your operational instinct, those who have experience will be able to jot it properly. Now look at how you are currently managing them. Are your strategic suppliers getting strategic treatment, long term partnership, relationship, and joint risk reviews? Or are you negotiating your most critical supply relationships the same way you buy stationery of your office? That exercise will take some time, but the risk it reveals could protect months of revenue and you will get a good understanding. So, guys, subscribe, new episode every week, and tell me in the comments. I will try to read as much comments I can. What percentage of your S&OP plan actually gets executed every month? Okay, this is SCM decoded for you. Supply chain management, real operations, deep theory decoded. Thank you so much. Bye bye.